Hello, everybody. Good morning. It's our absolute pleasure to have you with us at the very first of what will be many sessions for the Ministry of Eco-Education for the pioneer schools that are joining the project. My name's Dahlia. I'm a trustee for the Green Britain Foundation.
I am also a trustee of the Green Britain Foundation.
I'm Paul. I have been a geography teacher for the last 10 years, and then now I work for a charity called Sustrans part-time, sort of engaging in ideas of air quality, working with a whole variety of schools, so working with primary schools all the way up to sixth form colleges. And then also I've kind of increasingly been involved in authoring curriculum and trying to be innovative in the way that we engage young people with some of these ideas and issues in the world.
Can I just say, we're just a humble primary school, so for us to be here at this point, this juncture, a year down the line, is surprising and invigorating. We would never have anticipated being anywhere like this, and it's taken us by surprise, but it's a wonderful thing. Our starting point, and I think look, clearly all of us are very concerned at the eco crisis that we're all facing, but I think it's important for us to be clear here that our starting point for this was very much educational. As schools, we've all been beavering away to try and create curriculums for our schools, because it's the latest bee in the bonnet of the powers that be, and we embraced it fully because we thought, yes, perfect opportunity. This is exactly what's been missing, and we've gone at it in quite a lot of depth. We've thought about it long and hard. Tried this avenue, tried that avenue. We're nearly there now, but it's taken us a very long time. We thought it was the kind of thing that we really needed to devote a lot of time and energy to, and so we've come at this from an educational angle. We've worked closely with a lady called Deborah Kidd, who has come up with this lovely word, botheredness. It's not a word, clearly, but it's a good word. She says that if you're going to be delivering a curriculum, you want children to feel bothered by the knowledge that they're encountering, and bothered to do something with that knowledge, something meaningful, to get out there and try and make a difference with that knowledge. So we've read her books, we did some inset with her. It's very much driven our approach. And we came up with, before I approached Dale, we had come up with 7, now 8 threads, we're calling them. This is not an unusual thing. This is not rocket science, but our threads were things like eco-awareness, an appreciation of difference, a love of beauty and creation, a sense of community. These are the kind of threads that we were looking for to run all the way through our curriculum. So every topic we did, we wanted to make sure we were lacing these threads through them, with the idea that at the top of that thread is if you like, a year 6 child leaving the school with this kind of knowledge base, and the kind of values attached, that they're leaving the school with that kind of profile. We're looking for a year 6 profile, if you like, of child delivered through these threads and through the rest of the curriculum. And the eco one, we started working and playing with that quite early on because it was a very obvious one to get stuck into. And we did a few units of work, and it's not surprising. Of course, it's not surprising. It's proper botheredness here. The children were really engaged by it, and just passionate about the learning. And we thought, yes, this is it. We found something they're bothered about. Obviously, we're all bothered about it. And at that point, we went to Dale and said, look, here you are. We've had this long association with you as a parent, etc. Is it now time for us to sit down and put our heads together and see if we can create something together, which sort of delivers on that thread, and and clearly ecotricity have the means and the know-how to actually make it into something quite special. As I said, I had not anticipated this. This is quite a far cry from what I was thinking. I was thinking we were just going to have a few meetings and it was going to stimulate a bit of thinking in school, getting Paul on board and the whole thing rolling. I mean, there's a whole other ball game. So yes, it's nice to be described as the trailblazers. Actually, we're just like any other school out there looking to develop their curriculum, just as the other schools here today will be trying to do the same thing. And I suppose one assurance I would give to anyone listening to this is, you know, some of the concern that might be thrown your way is, oh yeah, but what about the rest of the curriculum? And how are you gonna, you can't, you know, throw that out. And what about this? And it's a real juggling act. Well, I'm just putting it to you that our starting point for this was very much finding a good driver for our curriculum, something that's really going to properly bother the children, and it works. So it is doable. Don't feel it has to be, as Paul said in his literature, it doesn't. It's you take what you want from it, you work it for yourself. But what could be more important than having a section of our curriculum devoted to this? Well, I think we all recognise that. So yes, there's the journey.
So I'm Kerry. I'm a year 3-4 teacher, worked here for quite a while. And my year 3-4 team a couple of years ago, along with the 5-6 team, started thinking about how we could bring in more climate awareness, eco awareness into our curriculum. And it was actually because some of the children started asking questions. So a few years back, it's actually our current year 6 have just left. When they were in year 3-4, they were just obsessed. We had all the David Attenborough programs on at the time, and they just kept asking questions. And so our team at the time sat down and said, well, what can we do that links to what we're supposed to be doing in our geography curriculum, but actually then makes it more relevant for them? Because they were the ones asking questions and thinking, well, we've got to then answer those questions for them and help them find out more. So we sort of developed, it started off just being called the Blue Planet because of the documentary, but they became really concerned about the plastic crisis, and they led it. You know, we started off with a little inquiry session and then just took it on from the children's point of view where they wanted to go. So you had children that were fascinated about how plastic originated, those that wanted to know which companies were responsible for the pollution and who to write to, who to complain to. So you had a supermarket brigade, and basically just went with them. So that was our first sort of tryout with it. And at the same time, 5-6 had materials as a science unit, and we're going, it's just getting a little bit boring doing the same old thing, and what else can we do? And they started looking at a microplastics initiative, and had Bath Spa involved with them and Bath Spa students. And we Nick gives us quite a lot of freedom with our curriculum as well, so we don't have to always necessarily do science every week. It can be blocked science, and 5-6 decided to do a science week all focused on microplastics, and the outcome was the children leading this massive, it looked chaotic, but it was amazing, this massive event in the hall where they were educating parents, visitors, all the children from reception up to year 4 about how microplastics are formed and how you can have plastic alternatives. And so we've basically just been sort of doing trial and error to see what works and what doesn't. And so this year was our second time of looking at the plastic crisis. And again, the children took it a completely different way. They were really in on, we want to do protests, we want to be able to write speeches, we want to do little TED Talks. So we watched lots of speeches. Obviously, Greta was a perfect one for them to look at, but also other eco speeches that they could look at. And they wrote to supermarkets again, but they were also really inspired by art. They're quite an arty group, this lot. So we did a whole project on Banksy and his protest posters and spray painting. And so they all created ecological posters, protest posters, which if it hadn't been for COVID, we would have marched around the streets of Stroud with. Next time.
I think what you've illustrated there, Kerry, is there's maybe 2 key strands to a lot of what you've been doing as well, is that idea that you bring in external voices and external organisations. So is it you've also had, was it a plastics company that came in, or you went and visited? What was
no, that was the 5-6 that was linked to their microplastics. We were very lucky here with our parents. So most of the time when we say we're doing something, a parent pops out of the woodwork and says, oh, I've got a link to that. So a child in year 5, 6, their parent set up almost like an initiative for them. They had to design, correct me if I'm wrong, Nick, I think they had to design a sunscreen bottle. Is it sun cream bottle, wasn't it? Yeah. Sunscreen bottle that wasn't using plastic. So I had to create a plastic alternative. And then the winners of that group got to go around and look at the actual company that would have produced these products.
Because you've also had some university speakers in as well, haven't you? You've engaged with the local community, which I guess is another strand of this as well, is that idea of making best use of what's within the local community.
Yeah, and that then goes back to what Nick was saying earlier about our threads. So sometimes sort of doubling up, so you're not trying to do too many things and go, well, actually, we've got an eco thread, but at the same time, we've got a community thread, and they could become one thread and go through so that we're not overloading ourselves and overloading the children. So
one thing, sorry to cut in, Kerry, that we found inspiring, Paul, working with you, is just recognizing we walked into unwittingly how these threads are so closely entwined. So the whole, sense of community and that wonder and awe at the beauty around you, it's all one and the same thing within this eco curriculum. The links are sure and fast.
Just to add to that as well, Nick, I think that anyone who has concerns about the idea that it might detract, and I know you've mentioned this earlier as well, is just all of the research shows that any emphasis you put, any enthusiasm that you put into the curriculum has positive outcomes. And what this does is it just gives a lens through which to explore that. And if anything, it gives more weight, more reasons to then explain to, be it OFSTED or whoever that you want to communicate with, to say this is what we as a school are about and what our curriculum's about. The other thing, Kerry, I just wanted to touch on as well is that idea of meaningful outcomes. And that's something I think that you have for years done really well.
Yeah, we've not that writing's not important, because I'm also the English lead, so I need to make sure that writing does happen, but it doesn't always have to be a written outcome. And for some of our children, the best way for them to show their understanding is going to be through a piece of drama or a piece of art or a speech or a 5-minute video of something. One of our members of staff said they could even do it through dance if they had to. But I think it's just making sure that we give them a variety of ways of presenting their facts and presenting their understanding. And also it's about making sure it's in their head. And sometimes having it written down on a piece of paper doesn't necessarily mean it's in their head. So having to do a presentation or a class assembly or a video, an interview, whatever, we're just making sure that it's in their heads. And you can talk about revisiting it as well. So we introduce the idea of the plastic problem in year 3, 4. And so when they go off into then 5, 6 and they're looking at microplastics and nanoplastics, it's the next stage on, and it's building on that's the whole point, is building on from reception up to year 6. Each time. So we try and have things that are revisited. Can't revisit everything, but the key facts we try to.
Because it's also, is it oracy and there's another one as well, these sorts of strands that I know, Nick, we've talked about in the past, to say that's something actually as a school that we're keen to emphasise, and it does fit in, like you say, with this as well.
Yes, we're very keen for the children to be able to speak their truth, if you like. And so we've worked with School 21, with the oracy project there, and looking at ways of developing oracy in the school, and being bold enough to have it there as an outcome. I think the we run around like little ferrets in the undergrowth sometimes, worrying about evidence. I think we've got to be bold enough to embrace outcomes which are oracy based. It doesn't all have to be written and easily evidenced. Because otherwise there's a danger that we're getting in the way of good learning, to be honest. If we feel we've got to commit everything to paper, that's all time. It's not necessarily time best spent on it with a particular outcome. So yes, oracy very much at the heart of the project.
I think the other thing, Nick, that came through very clearly early on in this project was the idea that as a school, you've got a really clear and distinct sense of what it is you want the students to be like at the end of the journey through your primary school. And already I know lots of the teachers had that similar kind of vision of this is what our students are like, or this is almost how we want them to be as well.
And I think it goes both ways. I think you have no choice as a community school but to ride your community's wave, if you like. As Kerry said, they're quite an artistic community around in Minchinhampton. we have to be the school for them. They are, and to build on their strengths and to deliver on their inclinations, if you like, as opposed to just imposing our curriculum upon them. It has to be their curriculum. So yes, it goes both ways. And yes, then what we're looking for is tapping into the kind of people they are and making them into something, yes, it's like a profile of a year 6 child, as I was saying earlier on. And it includes, I mentioned several things earlier on, but it includes things like, you know, a sense of spirituality, a sense of their own strengths. Well-being is very important to us. Getting out in the outside world is very important to us. All of these, as again, these things, you can see them coming together very neatly under the umbrella of the eco curriculum. So yes, both ways.
We've got Megan on the call. I don't know if Megan, did you want to jump in and share any? So you're a teacher from, you introduce yourself, yeah.
Hi, I'm Megan. I've been teaching year 2 this year, and my colleague and I recently engaged in the bee topic and engaged children in the bee topic, and they absolutely loved it, as predicted. There was bee books coming into school and bee pictures and bee facts and all sorts of different things. And the end outcome for our classes was actually in English. We wrote leaflets and posters, and we said to the children, your audience is going to be your neighbours. We're going to photocopy these leaflets 10 times, and you'll distribute them around your local community and spread awareness. And they were so engaged in it. We had sentences like starting the posters like, are you happy living in a dying world? If bees die, we die. And then they said, but it's not all doom and gloom, because here are some things you can do to help. And then they listed all the things that we'd learned about. Like it could be as simple as have a bowl of water in your garden filled with marbles, so that when the bees want to drink of water, they're not going to drown in your water. They can fly onto the marbles and then drink. And they had all these ideas, and their writing was some of the best writing they've done all year for some of them, because they had that audience and they wanted to impress. And we also had a beekeeper come in, because as Kerry said, parents at our school just seem to have all these links and all these different things that they do in their spare time, because they're all very talented people. So we had a parent come in and he brought in, he didn't bring any bees in, but he brought in all the equipment, and he got dressed up in his beekeeping suit, and he had his little hives, and the children sat perfectly for an hour listening to him, and then they asked loads of questions, and then they told him things that they knew and they'd learned. And it was just wonderful. It was the best end to the bee topic. And sadly, we didn't get to finish our DT for the year. We just absolutely ran out of time with all the madness going on. But we were supposed to make bee homes. And some of the children said, oh, I'm going to do it with my dad over the summer, and my mum over the summer, and we're going to make sure we have some bees in our garden. So yeah, I think it was really successful, and I think they learn a lot about bees, and I think they're interested now, so they'll continue to be interested.
Yeah. Thank you, Megan. It's kind of really interesting hearing that perspective from the class teacher as well. But Nick and Kerry, are there any like top tips? Is there a top tip or some top tips that you would give schools who are then joining this process that you think, that's something to be mindful of early on?
I think you have to, I like everything sort of in a box, and I like to know what I'm doing. I think sometimes you have to sort of throw everything out and just be willing to take a risk, because I think if you just keep on doing what like Nick said earlier, getting told from the high above what we must always be doing, we are going to miss a trick with these children. And it sounds a little bit twee and all this, but they are the ones that are going to be inheriting this problem, but they're also the ones that can probably fix it. So our current year 6 that have just left, I've got no doubt in my mind they will go and make a difference in this world. They are quite a determined bunch of kids. So I think you have to sort of, throw things out and take a risk, because it'll probably work.
Drawing on what Kerry's just said there, I'm the polar opposite. I'm the blue sky, throw it all up in the air, take a risk, which is why Kerry, by the way, is my deputy head, why the thing works, because otherwise it would all be unmitigated chaos. So yes, I think you've got to make some room there for risk taking, for throwing a challenge to yourself and the children, seeing what, not worrying too much about what the outcome's going to be, just take some risks. And I think, again, drawing on what Kerry's just said there, and something you came up with, which inspired me, Paul, is actually don't go at this with the idea that they're just primary school children, we've just got to teach them about it and do some tokenistic projects which will give them the idea about what it's all about. But actually, no, go at it with the idea of making a real difference with these children right now. It's right now, present, the eco crisis. You've actually got to do something right now. And the children do have the capacity to do that. Whether it's the leaflets going next door, as Megan's just described, or convincing members of the community that microplastics are a bad idea, they can actually do something right now. And I think that's an important thing to bear in mind. It has to have integrity.
And I think it's also, as well as looking at, like I said, not doubling up and trying to see what other links you can make. So our English unit, and like you said earlier about having text that we use. So we had, because we work with a CLP because we're an associate school. So we had a CLP Power of Reading unit that was all about recycling plastics. And part of that unit then was about them writing speeches. So then that just sort of dovetailed into what we were doing with our geography unit at the same time. So we try to make the right links across the curriculum. Don't just do it for the sake of it, but actually trying to use our time wisely. And we were like, well, we haven't got to tell them those facts about it because they learned it in the geography lesson. We haven't got to bring it back into the English. So I think it's just looking at how you can use your time and, I think finding the right literature. And like I said, you've created that long list of books for teachers as well as books for pupils, because it is about educating yourself. But I think being able to use a picture book is a brilliant way in for any age and just making it relevant for them.
What we have done then through the Ministry of Eco-Education is we have a vision of schools where sustainability is at their core. And what that means, though, is going beyond the sense of how sustainability is engaged with at the moment, and instead putting it at the heart of the curriculum so that each and every lesson within the school context actually engages with ideas of sustainability, rather than the situation at the moment, which is often it's seen on the periphery, it's a smaller group, and it's a niche almost. What we're also then, from the teacher's perspective, our vision is that teachers are supported, and the idea that they have the resources and materials to feel confident in order to teach this within their classrooms. And then ultimately, from a young person's perspective, it's then that they receive the education that they need now, that they feel like they have the knowledge and skills and understanding in order to be prepared for the world that they are living in at the moment. So in terms of creating that vision, we have a mission to achieve that. And at the heart of that is the concept of co-creation. So this whole project is about bringing together teachers as a partnership to help co-create and build on each other's strengths and bring together then almost this best practice. So I'm sure lots of the schools on the call will have things that they are already doing at the moment that they champion and that they think are really good. And what we're keen to do is to help highlight those and translate them into other environments and schools so that everyone can learn from each other. And then I guess this idea of partnership as well is partnership between schools and teachers. So bringing together teachers who are like-minded and have similar enthusiasm, but also helping to spread that across other teachers who might feel less confident. So helping to build the confidence of everyone, but also then the partnership between organisations and charities who already exist within this space. So part of the project is about highlighting the resources that already exist and stringing them together or weaving them together into a cohesive and coherent curriculum that then makes much greater sense within the school context. In terms of outcomes then, in the long term, the intention is that this becomes mainstream so that half of all primary schools are using these sorts of materials and resources. What this will also do then is help to engage young people with ideas of eco-anxiety, help them feel empowered, and therefore will reduce ideas of eco-anxiety. But ultimately what just as Nick was mentioning, having at the core of this sense of agency, and that young people feel empowered and feel like they have the knowledge and skills in order to engage with society and having a meaningful relationship with society and the rest of the natural world. So just moving on then, we can kind of summarize that into these 3 statements. So these are almost our key strap lines, you know, this idea of partnerships, the idea of resources and sharing best practice. And then the other thing maybe that I've not mentioned as well is this is not about something that is a radical change and throwing everything out that you already do. Instead, it's about reframing or rearranging what you already do around the lens of sustainability. So this fits with the national curriculum. This is essentially just rearranging the national curriculum around these broad inquiry questions that have sustainability at their core. And then just in terms of the journey. So early on, we wanted to make sure that there was a sound academic foundation to this. So part of what I've done in terms of my research is creating a document that compiles the current situation. So in this document, it looks at the scientific background in terms of the climate and ecological emergency. It looks at ideas of social justice, and this is actually a document that anyone can access, and we'll make sure that you've all got the link to this. So it sets the picture or the background. It also then looks at what environmental education frameworks already exist, so that can then has informed the approach that we use. And then it's gone, the kind of other key element was looking at the current picture, so almost mapping the landscape of what environmental education already exists, what resources are out there, what has the greatest impact. So things like the Eco Schools initiative, which has particularly widespread reach in the UK. And then also looking at some of the big key organisations and just signposting their resources, because again, that's a key theme of this, is creating a curriculum that signposts those resources that already exist. And then the second half of this document looks at what our curriculum is about, and that's something I'm going to go into a bit more detail with you now. So what I wanted to clearly outline is that there is a journey, and that by joining this project, you jump into that journey. And this is something that's been modelled and almost trialled with Minchinhampton. And so we wanted to emphasize the idea that we are supporting schools throughout this journey, that it's not that we are dumping this material and running. Instead, we're sort of holding hands, and this is all about creating a supportive environment. So the initial step is all about consulting the broader school community. And that's with the appreciation and understanding that actually you can't have a meaningful change, or you can't have meaningful change without engaging everyone and bringing everyone along in that journey. So this is with step 1, the key part of this is consulting the community, using like active listening techniques, using lots of surveys that we have created, so templates that you can survey students, staff, parents, and engage them with these ideas of sustainability to understand where they are now, what their understanding is, what their skill level, and also their fears and their concerns as well, so that they can be alleviated before moving on to the next step. The next step though then is looking at the curriculum that schools already have. So looking to see, are there opportunities that can be used? How can the curriculum be reframed? Where are the opportunities to slot in some of these curriculum elements? Also looking at the school grounds or the local community, thinking about what green or open spaces does the school have access to? And then also looking at the staff as a resource and thinking, what are the strengths of the staff? What are the weaknesses? What would the staff or the staff community like to develop themselves? And then signposted. So we've got a whole variety of opportunities that we have compiled that are available, from some of them free, some of them are things to read and watch, but other things maybe are things that have some cost associated. But the idea of signposting lots of the training that is available in this space, already available. The third step then is thinking about having a coordinated launch and trial. So this is something that we're going to be doing with Minchinhampton in September. But the idea is to focus attention around these ideas of sustainability and the curriculum and having events that inform the parents and the wider school community about what will happen. And that might be through modelling some of the lessons, engaging parents with some of the lesson material so that they can see what the lessons are like. And also, though, giving a manageable starting point so that teachers don't feel overwhelmed that this is all encompassing, but instead thinking this will focus on one element that I'm going to begin with. And then as my confidence builds, I can then develop and include other elements as well. The fourth step is about feedback and reflection. And again, that's something important to have throughout the process, but also to have almost staging posts that then reflects back. Again, gauging the opinion from the wider school community, what's been working, what's not been working, and then to feed that back in. And then finally, this is almost where the butterfly kind of emerges and spreads its wings and flies off. This is then the opportunity where teachers can use some of the approach and resources that we've compiled and bring those together through their own innovation and creativity to create their own curriculum elements. So the idea is maybe, I'll show you in a second, we've got a database of lots of the resources available from organisations, and it might be that teachers dip into that, cherry pick some of the ones that they would like to stitch together around their own inquiry question. And actually here is that database, and again, teachers will have access to this so that they can explore and search using key terms. And what this also does is it highlights lots of the different organisations. So you can see here lots of the organisations that it may be schools have already heard of, or hopefully this also introduces schools to new organisations that have excellent resources available for teachers. And I guess also what I should highlight as well is that as well as resources, there's also links at the bottom to documentaries and other types of resources, as well as maybe that lesson material that teachers might traditionally think of. So we've got this database, and this database actually has been the starting point for my process to think about how these can stitch together and we can weave these into a coherent curriculum. I guess also that the point I should make now as well is that the current situation is that teachers might know of some of these and might dip into some of them in their own teaching, but it might be quite isolated. It might be in a single lesson, or it might be occasionally or a certain term. But instead, this is about embedding these sorts of ideas consistently throughout a curriculum, throughout a scheme of work. And then that database has then led to this document, and here's just a selection of some of them. What this shows is particularly how lots of the inquiry questions are framed around or have a key concept that underpins them. So we've got a selection of concepts that give a direction to the topics, and all of this, I guess, is something that maybe teachers would need to sit down and read to understand better, but there essentially is a framework to these inquiry questions, and they have a direction through the concepts. They also have an outcome, and those outcomes are creative, or there's a focus on creativity so that there's something interesting and different. Those outcomes are also more project-based, so they're maybe longer lead-in times. They also have more of a genuine or real-world audience as well. And again, Nick was talking about some of those ideas earlier. That sense of bother partly comes from the idea that students are creating work with a genuine audience and with some meaning behind it, rather than just the teacher themselves. So each of these inquiry questions is a series of between 8 and 12 lessons. And again, there's flexibility in the sense that if teachers want to or have the space within their timetabling, they can commit more time to these questions and these lessons, or less time. So again, flexibility, I guess, is another thing to emphasize with this. So should we all go vegan? And what you might notice is that the questions are quite short and sharp, but they're purposefully provocative, both to engage the learner, but also just to sort of spark people's interest more broadly. Each topic, each inquiry question has key texts, and these have been compiled through the help of lots of the teachers from Minchinhampton and Kerry in particular, who's helped to highlight texts that link with the topics. And they can be used again with flexibility, that it might be the teacher dips into elements of those and uses them as part of lessons, or it might be that the children are encouraged to read some of these. So it depends. Also, some of these texts are focused on teachers. So the idea is that it might be something that helps inform teachers and provide some of that background knowledge. You can see I've talked a little bit about the key concepts, main assessment or outcome. This one has a public speaking competition. So the idea is that it prepares students to then have a bit of a public speaking. Also, we have this element here that shows how it links to the national curriculum. And the idea is that this is relatively sparse, so that then there's an emphasis. So for this topic, the emphasis is on the composition of writing that then informs the public speaking. And we've got elements here of maths and science, and then also other elements of the primary national curriculum. The other thing I wanted to just highlight as well is that each of these inquiry questions have key ideas embedded within them as well, which are a series of bullet points that essentially highlight to the teacher the key kind of almost concepts or ideas that want to be conveyed to the students, just to clarify the direction of the topic. And then within that, you just see here a little bit more detail. Each lesson has its own question. And then the way that these schemes of work are structured are that they bring together external resources from other organizations. And you can see with these links, you can see where they fit in. And then there's a little bit more direction just to give teachers an idea of how they might use that resource. Sometimes it is that the resource itself has that direction embedded within it. But this also then, I guess, is part of that co-creation idea of what we're wanting is for teachers to continually feed into this. So at this stage, when we share this, we want teachers to comment and add suggestions. So it might be that actually, as a teacher, you know a really good resource all about honeybees or honey, and you could suggest that, and then that can be used to help build this curriculum and this resource. So that's another thing that we wanted to really emphasize. So I know that's been a bit of a speedy journey through this, and all of the material that I've talked about will be linked to and is accessible for teachers. And it might be that it might take a bit of time for teachers to read and then fully understand. The first thing I should probably say then is that we are working with an OFSTED inspector and people linked with the OFSTED organisation who have been giving guidance and kind of feeding back on lots of materials as well. So you know, that hopefully would alleviate anyone's concerns. The other thing though to say then is that the whole curriculum is around reframing the national curriculum. So it's not about removing elements of the national curriculum and not doing certain things, but instead doing them in a way that the sustainability and ideas of the environment give the lens through which those elements of the national curriculum are taught. And hopefully that's clear in terms of the way that the schemes of work are structured, are in a way that actually signpost very clearly which elements of the national curriculum are engaged with within that topic. And hopefully it then gives teachers the confidence to feel like, yes, they are ticking that box, or that area is covered, and that by the end of their time at primary school, they will then have experienced and learned all of this material. But the thing that we really wanted to emphasize was that it gives it a really meaningful and purposeful approach for the students. So rather than learning something in isolation or in abstract, instead so a good example might be elements of maths, like measuring the diameter or height of something. They can go outside and measure the diameter of a tree, and that can then form part of a process of learning about the importance of trees, but that they can then see the context of maths within that. So I think that's an important element.
Ofsted would like to see themselves as it can be an inhibitor. I think they have to just be humble enough to accept that they can be an inhibitor. I think you're absolutely right. The national curriculum is delivered through this. By the way, the national curriculum is in many ways been left this time round quite a thinner and more flexible document, with the very idea that this kind of project can be worked into the curriculum. That was the whole idea of keeping it thinner. So it's very much doing what the idea was. In terms of the whole intent bit and all of that, you know, it completely delivers on a curriculum that has the intention and the and all of that. So it's a perfect deliverer for that. I suppose it's the evidence bit that can cause people to get themselves in a flap. And I suppose there are two sides of my thinking to this. The first one is get, you need to be jump sideways and be a little bit more creative about what counts as evidence and what you can rely on. So I'll give you an example. We're working with a storyteller this year, and we're talking about how we can evidence the impact of that work over 22 weeks. And we're looking at, for example, things like emotional resilience surveys and so on, to look at the impact on their emotional literacy and so on by doing all that storytelling. There are other ways of doing this. It doesn't have to be in a piece of writing or something tangible, I suppose is one thing. And the other thing is just to be a bit brave about the evidence trail. Just because something is measurable doesn't mean you should measure it. Just because something is potentially evidence doesn't mean you should evidence it. You just need enough. And it's absolutely fine to be saying to an Ofsted inspector, I've done a bit of Ofsted inspecting, not anymore, but perfectly fine to say, go and talk to the child. And as Kerry said earlier on, the most important thing here out of all of this is it's in the child's head, that they really get it and they're ready to speak their truth. Now, if you can count on your children doing that, ask said Ofsted inspector to go and have a chat to the child. It doesn't have to be there in a solid piece of writing. People to go tick, that's a tick of the box, that's fine. Ofsted inspectors are trained to be a lot more flexible in their appreciation of evidence than that. And sometimes it's us at the school level who get ourselves in a bit of a twist and end up over evidencing, I suppose.
I think in terms of it fits into the journey, in that idea that the first step is to gauge the school community's knowledge and understanding, strengths and weaknesses. So both that you can weave in the strengths of staff and use the things that they're interested in, but also, like you say, kind of pick out potential weaknesses and then look for opportunities to develop that. So we've got this list of opportunities that are available from a whole variety of organisations that teachers can then engage with. But I mean, even before maybe taking that step, there's the idea of just reading, watching. So I know with Nick, there's been, I've suggested some video clips, one from Rob Hopkins that was all about imagination. There's been some books we've talked about. So some of the so How Bad Are Bananas was one of them, and There Is No Planet B. And these are things that teachers can dip into, read sections of, and help support some of their teaching, as well as the idea of maybe texts that link with. The other thing, though, that this might kind of segue onto Nick is the thing that I've really appreciated from Nick is the idea of giving staff enough time, so giving them the space and time to either focus on the curriculum development, so to have time to think about kind of topics and lessons, but also just as a school community to think about these things. One of the things that we wanted to emphasise as well was that it's almost like a spectrum that schools can pick at what stage they want to join. So the very light touch might be that there is a scheme of work, a topic that some teachers have an interest in, that they say, okay, we will try this. It will, within the school, there'll be one year group that at one point tries one of the topics, and then from that it might then help build the confidence, and the rest of the school community feel like, oh, they might be able to take another one, and then over a year or two it might build into something bigger. At the other end of the spectrum, schools might decide to actually become fully on board, and that actually that lots of this aligns already with their approach and what they're doing, and so that there is this relationship then where they can bring on board more of the schemes of work and resources. And actually then it might even be that some schools feel like they're confident enough to start building their own schemes of work and own inquiry questions using some of the resources, and that creative process is actually part of their beginning. So I think it's important to realise that there's a whole variety of ways that schools can join depending on which stage they are in terms of this journey.
We tend to, in the autumn term, quite early on, block a week out where you can go off curriculum as such. So you can put aside your maths and English for a week, the world will not end, and dedicate that week to something. So that's, for instance, I know this coming autumn, the 5-6 will be back on their microplastics initiative and doing again the links with the companies. I've just been speaking to my colleagues yesterday about we're going to be taking Jackie Morris's and Rob McFarlane's Lost Words book and the Lost Spells, and we're going to drip feed that throughout the rest of our English curriculum. So we're going to start autumn with it, start spring with it, start summer with it. So, but blocking out time for it off everything else. So I think you could also do that.
And while we're sitting here, and Megan, quite right, we are, yes, I think you have to go at it whole school, but we have been building our confidence and trying things out for a couple of years now. So of course there's a timescale here, and you as you quite rightly say, Paul, there has to be a menu of possibilities, really, whatever suits people at their particular moment in time and with the staff they have on board. So, you know, we're not completely ready to throw ourselves hammer and tongs into it even now. So it is always going to be this. There's a heavy commitment to it. There's this wonderful backup of resources and time now from Paul, but actually you've still got to feel your way.
The first stage might be that schools have access to all of the materials and the background to this so that they can feel comfortable. And then the idea is that they will be able to follow this sort of journey, use the templates and materials, but also during that process as well, you know, they'll be able to engage with me and with the rest of the team, and we'll be able to have more of a conversation. And it might be that we help then connect people within schools as well, so that we can get expertise and knowledge. And it may be that there is some necessity for a kind of physical element of kind of helping to facilitate something or to build someone's confidence or to help feedback. But I think this is also where there's a great strength in terms of the internet and you know, in terms of the way that everything has moved forward with video calls, is that it's so easy now. With Nick, there were a few staff meetings where I dropped in and delivered some training, also just helped take some of the conversations. And again, that's something that might be a possibility. And then also just the idea that these are all shared documents. So all of the materials, anyone can now comment on and add suggestions. And that just is so fruitful in the sense of helping to kind of almost use the brains of all these, this community of teachers. So rather than it being the responsibility of one single person, instead, this is almost where it's kind of flips it on its head in that sense. So we've talked about the idea of time, but actually by sharing everyone's resources, it's easy then to produce something with the kind of very squashed sense of time. Over the last few months, about maybe 6 months, I've been working closely with Minchinhampton and with the great team of teachers there. And we've been going backwards and forwards in terms of ideas of lessons that they already had and resources that they use. And we've been sharing and developing those and building it. And that's created the foundational core of a lot of what exists now. And maybe I should have said there's about 30 inquiry questions at the moment with a whole breadth of different themes or topics. And then the idea is we are recruiting pioneer schools. So these are schools who still are joining us very early on in this process. But the idea is that they then have the ability to help develop and feed into this. So there's almost like a reciprocal relationship that, you know, we are sharing our resource and providing this framework, but that teachers can also pass on their best practice and ideas and help inform and develop it themselves as well. And so we've got around 11, maybe 15 by September of a very small group of schools, of primary schools, that are going to be the pioneer schools. And the idea is that those schools show a real breadth of what primary schools in the UK look like. So there's a whole variety from Bristol up into Scotland. We've got some in Wales, as well as in the southeast. And those schools come from a variety of backgrounds and situations. So there are some of them are rural, but there's lots of urban schools. There's lots of schools with a variety of proportion of demographic in terms of the types of students. And that's something we're really keen to emphasize, is that this isn't something that's appropriate for only one type of school. This is suitable for schools in all settings, and there's the opportunity to tailor it and to play to the strengths of your local area in one sense. But the ambition then is for this to become mainstream. And again, so having talked to people at the at NEU and a whole variety of other teacher unions, they really support this idea that this is something that we can make mainstream within the next few years. And what we want is, we've got this goal of half all primary schools to be using these curriculum materials. This is all part of this journey towards COP26 in November in Glasgow. So it's the Climate Coalition. We're organising a very focused week in September, all around the great big Climate Week, and with a focus on the climate and ecological emergency. And so they're asking anyone, communities, to organise events to help highlight these issues and to bring people together. And so this could be a really good opportunity for schools to begin their journey, to show their commitment, and through some sort of event, it could be something relatively small, it could be something that's just an assembly, or it might be something with a wider impact. And I know we were in conversations with Nick about potentially live streaming some of the events and activities that happen during that week at Minch, partly to just show and platform some of the great opportunities and activities that can be done through this type of curriculum, but also just to start that journey as well towards COP26. And I think also that's something important to say, is that this momentum around these sorts of ideas is only going to build, and that there's going to be an increasing pressure. I know I've highlighted that earlier on, but young people and the kind of wider society will be applying greater pressure on schools, on everyone, to really make the most of this and to show that they are responding to the climate and ecological emergency.
Yeah, this is where my pragmatic, practical head teacher head comes up. I guess the timescale is tight for us to do an all singing, all dancing week. But I think but that's not, I don't think that's what's important here. I think the fact is that we will be completely embroiled in this process of working with these materials and delivering on the curriculum, and we will just grab that opportunity that week, as Paul says, to put a focus on some of the things that are going on, maybe a bit of a live event with Paul, just to flag these things up, and we would just see it as part of the process. So yeah, we also have a very busy local group in Minchinhampton from the local community who want to do something with us that week. It's going to be a perfect vehicle, if you like, for us to bring ourselves alongside them and what they're trying to do in the local community. So I'm hopeful that will be that week will be a beginning for that partnership as well, which is exciting. So yes, we'll be involved. Paul and I, we will put some, maybe see some lessons, some of the things the children are doing, some of the children talking will be up there. You can get a little window into perhaps what the daily workings of the curriculum might look like during that week.
Nick, the other one that you've got experience of around, I think it was a maths initiative, but we were talking about the idea of a targeted event for parents, and partly motive to alleviate any concerns that they might have as a stakeholder within the school community, but also just as an opportunity to raise their knowledge and understanding around the climate and ecological emergency, as well as giving them a taster or a flavour of some of the more creative lesson activities. So to get them thinking actually that school has shifted since they were at school, both in terms of the how lessons are taught, as well as the what is engaged with within the classroom.
Yes, no, absolutely. Yes, no, I've got that. Yes, absolutely. I think our bringing the parent population on board, absolutely critical. And you know what, even though we are all passionate about this, we have to be wary. You know, there are going to be also questions out there from people, worrying about, well, is it something to do with ecotricity? Is it something, you know what I mean? There will be questions out there. Those need to be cleared up too. We need to be on the front foot in terms of being, open about this and bringing people on board. And yes, the stuff that we've done with Paul, where some of those staff meetings have been very eye-opening and inspiring for us. Some of the knowledge he's divulged and the way he's done it. To do that with the parents would be very inspiring for them. So yes, absolutely, Paul.
We do dedicate quite a lot of our staff meetings to curriculum development, because as all teachers know, when a new initiative comes along or something, the one thing we all need is time, and to get it all not just in our heads, but to then think about how we're going to get it delivered to the children, how it's going to be best resourced, etc. And there's never enough time in the day to do anything. You'd be amazed how much you can get done when there's no children in the building, but even then there's still not enough time. So I think we've worked really hard over the past couple of years to make sure that within staff meetings, inset days, twilights, management meetings, we've restructured all how that works as well. So there's just a lot of discussion. So like Nick said earlier, that everyone's on board and everyone's involved. It's not top down, it's coming from everyone. And whether you're an NQT or 20 years into your teaching, everyone has got a voice in this. But I think the big thing is about handing time over to staff to talk about it, to research it, to share ideas and expertise. And what we've also done as well is it's not just necessarily sitting in your planning teams. So you've got, taking expertise from the reception, the foundation stage teachers up to year 6 and mixing it all up as well. And so that everyone can, so Paul sent us a couple of inquiry questions a few weeks ago, and then we handed those off to the teams again to then say, well, how much further can we take them? But then we all mixed up and shared ideas as well. So I think it's about time and everyone on board, not just a level of management.
And I think if you do that, if you take away that sort of hierarchy and you flatten the leadership a bit, or at least flatten the development, I suppose, you just discover so much strength. It's just I think you quash an awful lot of ideas, an awful lot of strength half the time with the way that we work. We do something called philosophy for children in schools. A lot of schools do, and we find the same there. It's amazing what the children come up with when we stop speaking and we give them a chance to talk. It's extraordinary what they come back with. Humbling. The other bit I would say is the resources. One of the questions that Kerry and I had earlier on was, oh gosh, this is so big, and Megan were working on this as well, thinking, oh my gosh, it's such a big thing and we just haven't got the time in our busy lives. What Paul has done here, pulling together these organizations and the best resources out there, is a godsend, because this is it's time, isn't it? And all you need to do is watch a brilliant video or look at a particular resource, and as teachers you're spurred on to go and do that next lesson. You don't need more than that, but it is that time taken to find it. So really useful. The other thing as well, I'm assuming and hoping that once the launch happens and the other schools start feeding into the curriculum and so on, that this becomes, as we've said, a process, and very much one which hands autonomy to the schools, where people are working together all the time to go on building this. So I think that's where that's the best kind of professional development, rather than it being said to you, you're being part of it. I think if we want to be properly outstanding, and I don't mean outstanding in an OFSTED term, let's just ignore that terminology entirely. It is simply about knowing that you're not there yet, and you go on asking the questions, you go on thinking, you go through that bit of pain, and you just go on asking the questions. So we see this as the beginning of a process, but we're no different. We're not we're very average little school. We're not any great shakes. Every school out there in the country has the depth of inspiration and strength that our school has. So hopefully, yes, we're on board, we'll be there, but all these other schools coming on board, they have as much, if not more, to offer. I think that's the exciting bit. Looking at this thing, you think, oh my, it's so big and it's such a huge thing, and it is. Once you start looking at the environment and everything that could be educated about it, it feels almost unmanageable. But know that this is, I'm taking nothing, but this is very important to us. But it is one strand, it is one part of our curriculum. Our jobs as educators is to educate. We're not here to solve the climate crisis. It's just very, very important that this climate crisis is taught well within our curriculum. So it's not going to bowl you over if you get involved. It's a brilliant resource to tap into. You know, we've had Paul here who you know, he is steeped in geography and eco curriculum and eco learning. So he's an expert. You can tap in and get what you need from it. It's not something that has to take over your entire curriculum, your entire world. It's such a boon for us. We're so pleased to be involved, and we are very normal. So yeah, this is for every man. This is for every school. So please do get involved. Thank you very much indeed.
The Green Britain Foundation, I actually helped found back in 2012 for Dale Vince, who is the founder of Ecotricity, chairman of Forest Green Rovers, and a real sort of green entrepreneur. We were looking at the time to create a charity or a foundation that would support the principles that we as an organisation across Ecotricity believe in, which is around creating a green Britain. Those principles being around how we approach living a green lifestyle, but taking that through the course of looking at the energy that we use, the way we travel, the food we consume and choose to eat generally, and also how we make space for nature. So the foundation has been running for a number of years. It is a very small organisation, but its main purpose is to look at how we can inspire and educate people to enable them to live a greener lifestyle. So when the idea of looking at education in a wider sense came about, and particularly around the fact that Dale, who was very close to Minchinhampton School, which is fantastic, wanted us to start to kind of work and collaborate together around creating a sort of new way of looking at the curriculum, it was very obvious that this work should fit within the Green Britain Foundation. So we are funding this piece of work. We see it not just a short-term piece of work around creating some curriculum work, pieces and materials, but something for the long term, where we'll be able to support the whole process of infiltrating and empowering a different way of learning. So it's a long-term project for the charity itself. We're here for the long term in terms of supporting that throughout. And we're very keen, therefore, to make sure that we understand all the necessary steps to be able to achieve that support. So from my perspective and Dahlia's and Dale's is, for us, it's about the charity making a really, really big difference in the process of looking at this work.
We are so excited, about the fact that Minch, the conversation that started a little while ago with yourself and Dale about you have so much knowledge in the school already, but to be able to have helped you repurpose things so that you have some great schemes of work to kind of inspire your young kids to be bothered with boldness, if you like. And I have to say, I was hugely impressed when I came into the school, and even just from the way the kids spoke on the video that Minch created. They are fantastic young adults in the making who really know their voice. So you clearly are hitting your objective in wanting to make sure you're, giving the kids that confidence in themselves. So I was hugely impressed by it.